The easiest attack on this question is the presence of among and between. The use cases for among and between are pretty easy to understand. Among is used to talk about more than two things, and between is used to talk about only two things. So if we go by the logic of the question, it says linking arrangements. So the arrangements are among the schools and the workplace or between. So since there are two entities involved, among should not be used. It should be C, D, or E. Now C and E look pretty similar, but one sharp difference that can be noted in D is that this phrase in the United States has been put right at the very beginning of the underlined portion. So this translates to the arrangements in the US. So we need to judge whether the usage of this prepositional phrase is actually right. And what we can see is in D and E, we have the pronoun they. And logically in E, the antecedent for they is just the arrangements. So the arrangements between the schools and the workplace have never evolved. Now in D, the they is simply not referring to the noun arrangements, but rather the entire prepositional phrase arrangements in the US. So if we go by that logic, we're saying the arrangements in the US between the schools and the workplace never evolved, as the arrangements in the US have in most countries. So you see, saying arrangements in the US in the other countries makes no logical sense. D goes off. Now the main difference that can be caught between C and E is that C uses this pronoun and this verb did, but C completely leaves that part out. So in C we have as in most countries, and in E we have as they did in most countries. Now we can understand that there is a comparative situation going on here. So when we see that this pronoun and verb has been left out in C, the immediate concept that must come to mind is the concept of ellipsis. Ellipsis is the omission of nouns and verbs in a comparison. And this omission is mainly done for the sake of concision. For example, this is a noun ellipsis. When I say, my explanations are better than others, think about it. Do I really need to repeat the word explanations here? So is there any need to say my explanations are better than other explanations? No, right? Because it's logically understood that that's what's being compared. And here is an example of a verb ellipsis. So if I say, I can explain SC better than most others. So again, do I have to repeat the can explain here? Because what am I trying to say here? I can explain SC better than most others can explain. So in this case, we have left out the word explanation. So that is noun ellipsis. And in this case, we have left out the verb can explain, and that is verb ellipsis. So the idea of ellipsis is that if I can copy paste this noun here after the others, it makes sense. That means the noun can be omitted. And if I copy paste the verb here in that position after others, then the verb can be omitted, and that's the verb ellipsis. See, noun ellipsis is pretty straightforward, but one has to be very careful when dealing with verb ellipsis. So for example, if I said, I like my brother more than my best friend. So what exactly does this sentence mean? So you might think that the meaning here is pretty straightforward, but is actually not. Because we can see that the verb that is being ellipsed here is like. And this sentence could mean one of two things. It could mean that I like my brother more than I like my best friend. But it could also mean I like my brother more than my best friend likes my brother. So you see, ellipsing this verb like can cause a meaning ambiguity because either of these sentences is possible. So in such a case, verb ellipsis cannot be done, and we would need to put the sentence in this form or this form. So let's try to take this concept back to answer choices C and E. You see, they have mentioned the verb did here, whereas in C the verb is not mentioned. So what exactly being compared here? The evolution of the arrangements in the United States versus the evolution of the arrangements in the other countries, right? So the verb here is never evolved. So if I ellipse the verb never evolved, what happens is that this sentence C would mean the arrangements between this and this never evolved in the United States as they have never evolved in other countries. And in E, because they are mentioning the did here, this sentence becomes as the arrangements evolved in other countries. So the verb did here is a direct reference to the verb evolved and not never evolved, because if that's the case, then instead of did, they would say didn't, as they didn't in other countries. So what exactly are we trying to compare here? Are we trying to say that the arrangements never evolved in this country as they have never evolved in other countries? Or are we trying to say that the arrangement never evolved in the US as they evolved in other countries? You will notice that E's logic is the most sound one, C goes off. Therefore, the right answer choice is E for echo.